Apologies for being a little bit late this morning. We're joined by Miriam Rivera. She is the KFA CEO. She's a former VP from Google. She's also a partner at Ulu Ventures, and she's been a seed investor for a number of years and has heard literally hundreds of pitches. So her advice is going to be invaluable when discussing just what makes a successful pitch. First of all, Miriam, how do most of the pitches even come your way? Is it always a referral?
Well, the most effective way to get into a VC meeting is to have a referral, and the most effective referrals are the CEOs of companies that are already in their portfolio, the referral of another venture capitalist, and then after that, the referral of someone they know well. And you keep on going backwards from there in terms of what the effectiveness is of getting that first meeting.
Do you take cold calls as an investor? And if you do, for pitches, and if you do, why do you?
So on extremely, extremely rare occasions, maybe once, I have taken a complete cold call meeting, and that was in part because it was in an area that I was a very active investor. It's in the legal tech area, and it was the first women CEO and COO of a legal tech company that I had seen pitch anything. And so I was curious about the team, and frankly, they wrote a really good letter about why, even though it was a cold call, I should meet with them, and that was effective because you could see that they had done their research, and they were a great team, and I did end up making that investment. So it's that 1 in a million, I think, that sometimes happens, and that hopefully will be a very successful investment.
How about, you're at a conference or something, and I know you even told me that people chase you across campus at Stanford sometimes trying to pitch you. What impresses you if someone does get your attention and tries to give you an elevator pitch? What impresses you? What takes for you to say, hey, I would like to hear more about this?
Well, usually it's more effective if you've set up a conversation than if you try to stop someone and shove a pitch deck in their hands as they go by at an event. I think usually it's easier if you have a very brief summary of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and I mean literally how they say the 30-second pitch? Well, the 30-second pitch should describe your business, meaning that your business is actually easy enough to describe that you could describe it that quickly. And then you kind of talk a little bit about yourself or the team of people that you've pulled together. What's great about the company? And that should probably be no more than a couple of minutes. And that's often enough to be able to see if it's something that is interesting. The other thing that's so important to do is just to be very clear on what an investor actually invests in. It doesn't really doesn't help your cause to bark up the wrong tree in terms of investing. So if you're a company that's in clean tech and you need tens of millions of dollars, you're talking to the wrong investor and a seed stage investor like myself that's an IT investor, for example. And also if you're in medical devices or drugs, you'd be talking to the wrong person in me, actually. So, try to figure out what these people actually invest in, what sort of capital they invest in companies, and what stage they invest in, and target yourself only to those people that are really appropriate to your company.
When you do get an in-person pitch, which you get, I'm sure, quite a few, what is it that makes you sit up initially and say, you know what, this is going to be an interesting conversation?
Well, the entrepreneurs one that I tend to like the best in terms of pitching typically have what I call a good combination of heart and mind in their pitch. They're telling a story that engages my belief that they really care about the market that they're trying to enter and or know that market very intimately for some reason or another. And they have a good story about why that's going to be a good business. Now, sometimes people have good stories about the good they want to do in the world, but I don't see how it's going to turn into a business. And other time, people can talk about a very good business idea that might make a lot of money, but I don't really get the sense that they care about it other than making the money. And usually that's not a good combination because the hardships involved in building a startup are such that you need to have your heart invested in the company, not just your mind, because when the going gets tough, you want this person to step up, ramp up, and face that adversity. And if their heart really isn't in it, it's almost, you know, the hardships are just too many to be able to overcome.
I do want to say, I know some people are watching, so if you have any questions for seasoned investor Miriam Rivera about pitches, please do submit them and we can get them to her. Again, you know, but what about if somebody has a great idea? I mean, you just see so much promise in it, but you don't see a lot of passion in either their delivery or maybe in just who they are. You know, what then?
Well, I mean, one, you have to think about different styles in terms of presentation, and that some entrepreneurs may not be the one that is going to be the bestseller or marketer of an idea. But the question is, can they attract a team of people that really can take this great idea and bring it to the market? And that is, you know, that's really their job to do. And if they can't do that, then most great ideas, well, one, I'm not necessarily a believer in great ideas. There's an idea born every minute, and the fact is that there's probably about 10, 15 companies pursuing each idea with some slight variations at any one time. So the great idea isn't what's really going to get me excited about working with an entrepreneur typically. It's going to be a combination of, is there a great market, and how well do they understand the market dynamics and the ability to enter that market, and do they have the right team to pursue that market? That's more important oftentimes than a great idea, because in the execution of an idea is really where the proof of the pudding is.
Well, let's say they are passionate and but they really don't have a good idea of how business works. I mean, you see this quite often, I think, probably in the Valley with tech founders who just don't really have that concept. What needs to be in their pitch? Somebody who's, you know, they're passionate, it's a pretty good idea, but they obviously, from their pitch, don't have a good business sense.
So there are many entrepreneurs that have great technologies that don't have great business skills or background, and to me that's not something that major. Again, as long as they can build a team where they have people that have the skills that they lack are going to be present on that team. My sense is too, though, that if they have a certain idea that requires real business expertise in order to penetrate a market, they need to get that expertise in the right place. So I'd rather see a founder who is a really strong technical founder realize, I really don't want to be doing the pitches, I really don't want to be talking to the customers, so I'm going to actually bring on a CEO, as opposed to somebody who is going to hold on to the role of CEO when he's not the best qualified to be able to do the things that that role requires. I'd rather see that person function as, you know, the CTO, the VP of engineering, some other founder role that makes the best use of that particular founder skill set.
Okay, we're getting some questions from Emil Safir. What is the age range of entrepreneurs who have made successful pitches with you? Youngest, oldest? What role does age play in your response?
So I would say that the youngest entrepreneur in my portfolio was about 19. The oldest entrepreneur in my portfolio is, and I hate to guess because I could be wrong, but I would say probably around 60. So it's a pretty big age range. The factor of age, the only factor that it plays for me is, has the person actually kept up or is able to learn new ways that business is being done, new ways of reaching the customer, and if they're able to demonstrate that, my sense is that age doesn't matter. So, for example, a lot of companies in my portfolio use social media to access customers as a cost-effective strategy compared to things like internet advertising. If a person really isn't comfortable adapting to those new ways of touching their customers, well, they're not going to be a strong entrepreneur regardless of their age. But I find that younger people often are using these technologies in their day-to-day life and are more facile with them. And again, I don't care either if the CEO doesn't use any of these technologies, but he builds a team that actually has the right skill sets to pursue their customer in the market today.
Okay. Next is from Mariah Lichtenstern. She's been a very active student and startup CEO and venture deals as well. Who do you want to see in the pitch meeting? Should all founders come? I've heard no, and also that 2 to 3 team members should attend. What is your view and why?
Well, usually you have one meeting to get the next meeting. That's kind of the reality of trying to get people to part with their money, is that for the most part they're probably not going to part with their money on one meeting. So the first meeting is really all about making a good first impression, and I think the reality of that kind of meeting depends a lot on the quality of the team and the focus of the team. I will tell you the worst meetings that I ever have as first meetings are one where essentially they want to spend 30 minutes doing a product demo. That is not a good first pitch. and if that is what you're thinking you're going to do with your time, or that the pitch of the technology is going to be the thing that's going to wow someone into making an investment, I think you're really mistaken. So the first thing I would do is realize that the impression you're making is based on who the team members are and how they can address the story of what market there is for this product, why this is the right time for this kind of product, what sort of what sort of problems this product solves. It basically has to tell a very engaging story around why your technology is going to be successful in the market and how big that market is, because that's really what the investor is trying to ascertain. The technology, of course, is a part of that, and you may want to spend a very short time on your technology demo, but my sense is that it's the biggest black hole that companies get themselves into, is spending too much time on product, not enough time on market. And I would recommend that the person who can tell the most engaging market story is the person that's in those meetings. But if you have some, whiz-bang technology person who either has already developed a reputation, has developed products in the past that have huge amounts of market penetration and users, bring that person and have them talk about how they built a product that attracted that kind of usage, because that's what I want to know. I want to understand how the technology creates that adoption by users, not so much at this stage how great the actual software is, and I think that can wait for a subsequent meeting.
For those who are doing a pitch deck during the meeting, what kind of data do you want to see in that deck?
I'll tell you that the thing that's missing the most from company pitch decks of all kinds is the total addressable market for a product or service that the company is trying to create. And that is a really hard question to try to figure out, but the further you get in terms of being able to tell a coherent market story, the better your pitch is going to go, and the more successful one I think your company is going to be, because you'll actually know what part of a market you're trying to pursue. So, for example, I'll give you some of the worst sorts of numbers I hear in pitches. I'm an ed tech investor. I've made about 15 ed tech investments. The global market for education is about X trillions of dollars. I can tell you that that is not going to impress me as a market analysis. And the reason why is that it has absolutely no relevance to your company. The relevance of the market to your company is about the market that you can reach with the resources that you have and the offering that you're making. So, for example, the market for education and being in the trillions of dollars is because there's higher education and K through 12 education, and there's special education, and so each of those parts of the market need to be segmented, and I need to understand that you could understand the whole market for education and what makes it however many trillions of dollars, but you're going to take this piece of the pie, and this piece of the pie is several billions of dollars, and there's already people paying money to buy similar products, or they can't actually solve a particular problem they have because it's too tricky to do right now, and your technology enables them to do something that everybody knows they want to do, but they just haven't figured out a way to do yet. And so there isn't really necessarily dollars associated with it, but the market for, like, let's say K through 12 software is this huge multi-billion-dollar market, and one of the things that prevents people from being able to buy more educational software is that every time they buy a new solution, they've got to make their new solution work with a very complex set of data that resides in different systems in the schools, for example. Now, and I'm laying up a story here for Clever, which is a company in my portfolio that essentially developed an API that could work with all sorts of different software products to access the data that was already residing in school systems but was essentially siloed. So that ended up being a pretty good investment, and now Sequoia is a follow-on investor in that company. And this notion of breaking free data, everybody understood would be a big market, and now it'll be a matter of seeing how big will that market become, because there wasn't a way to unlock it before.
Okay, you talked about just having too big of a market, claiming that that's addressable by a company. What else will turn you off in a pitch? Immediately you say, you know what, this is not going well.
There's a phrase we have in sales called puffery. Puffery is when you kind of exaggerate a little bit your product, like, oh, we're in discussions with so-and-so, and it really just means, like, I've put in a call to that person, but I've never actually gotten through. When you're talking about pitching, though, you're really talking about needing to have absolute credibility with your investor. And the things that will get you knocked out of my queue faster than anything are exaggerating the truth about what your company has done, whether you have contracts that are actually signed with a customer, how far along you are in different aspects of building your business, and trying to say that people are on your advisory board that are not, that kind of stuff. It's basically anything that makes you lose credibility from the point of view of integrity and honesty. Because if I'm entrusting both my dollars and my reputation to you, and that's what I'm doing when I'm an investor, I'm endorsing you publicly and saying, I believe in this founder, I believe in this company, I believe in this idea, and then you're going out in the marketplace and being dishonest, that reflects very badly on me and my reputation. So from my point of view, that's the worst possible thing, and almost any amount of puffery is inappropriate in the pitching process.
I did want to bring up during this week of the startup pitch class, they're addressing slides and how to put together, a pitch deck and that sort of thing. What is your advice about slides? How do you like to see them presented? What kind of information do you want to see on slides?
Well, I adhere to the notion that you can have probably no more than a maximum of 10 slides. I know Guy Kawasaki has a pitch deck that he recommends be no more than about 10 pages and large font. And the reason for this is that it takes a while to talk through each slide. So if a person comes with a 20 or 30 page pitch deck, you're not going to cover it all anyway. And also, you may not have covered the most important points in your pitch because you got bogged down on a page, or you created questions that took you off of the ability to cover the whole deck. And you're going to have a fairly limited amount of time to make that first impression. Some people, they may give a half an hour meeting, some people may give an hour meeting, but you would like to try to have probably no more than about 20 minutes of presentation and a lot more time for discussion if possible. And the reason for that is you're going to learn something from the questions that people are asking. You're going to hopefully be able to reformulate your deck on the basis of the objections that VC raises to your analysis or the weaknesses they see in the team or in the market or the idea. And you should really see each meeting as an opportunity for you to improve your story, even if you get nothing else out of that meeting. The person won't take a second meeting. You don't get an investment. There is a lot that you can glean, but if you're talking the entire time, there's not much learning that can go on in that meeting.
We have another question here. After listening to a pitch, have you ever felt like you should invest more than you can? Examples.
Oh, yeah. There are times when there is a great idea. There's one of them in my portfolio now that I think could do for video advertising what Google did for text-based advertising. Print ad. And so in that kind of company, one, it's usually oversubscribed. There are a lot of people that want to invest in that kind of a company, and the likelihood that you can invest what you would like is low, and so you're going to be allocated a percentage of the amount that you want to invest. And that happens fairly regularly on fairly hot deals in big markets with good teams, right? So that's kind of the story. But the reality is that it's often better to have, at my stage, since I'm a seed stage investor, it may be better to have a small amount of money in the hottest company than a bigger amount. And I'm not talking about hot like only in the market sense of like a faddish type of company that's really popular right now, but really a company that I think has real prospects. So I think of a person I know who invested $25,000 in the first Facebook round. Well, that person's sitting pretty happy right now, and it may have been smaller than what he would have liked to invest, or maybe it was a very early round, but I don't think he's complaining about it. So for later stage investors, the percentage ownership is actually a big aspect of whether or not they'll invest. If they can't get a large enough percentage of the company, they will walk away. So it depends on what stage, whether it's a problem that you can't invest as much money as you like. For me, it's often not, because even a $25,000 investment in Google or Facebook at the first round, some of those became billion-dollar return. You know, $1 billion out of 25K. That's pretty good. I'm happy with that. No, I did not invest in Facebook in the first round.
There are a lot of opportunities to publicly present a startup pitch. Does a startup that has been widely exposed lose or gain something in advance of a meeting with you?
That's a good question. You know, usually it's not the case that I think public pitches, like, you know, let's say South by Southwest, or here, you know, we have a Stanford incubator called StartX. They have pitch and demo days, Y Combinator, etc. As far as I'm concerned, the only downside of those kinds of companies is that they may be more competitive and or more expensive to get into, and I personally believe that a lot of the incubators at this point are, the companies that are coming out of them are overpriced relative to what they've created in terms of value. So for me, I just have to be disciplined when I see a company in that context. I have to decide that even at the valuation that they are currently, there is enough room for upside that I could still achieve a hurdle rate that I have at Ulu, and I have a 10x probability weighted return on my dollar invested as a metric that I use. And if I think, okay, it's valued at $8 million, but I think that company could achieve that kind of return, then that doesn't matter to me. What I don't believe is that a lot of those companies will achieve that kind of return, and so I have to be disciplined and walk away from companies that I think are otherwise attractive, but their valuation puts them out of my hurdle rate area.
Okay, last couple questions. How much do you care about ideas being patented before investing?
So in the past, absolutely none. In fact, I usually, and I'm actually an attorney by training. I did a JD MBA at Stanford, and I worked obviously at Google and other places, Ariba, where patenting of technology is something that is done routinely. And in the past, in the United States, there was a different regime in terms of patents that said it was really about who came up with an idea first, not who went to the patent office first. But we've moved in a direction that says whoever gets to the patent office first is going to be called the inventor of that product. And so in the past, I would actually warn people, don't go down the rat's hole of spending the kind of money patents take to do, because it takes time, it's an expensive process, and the reality is in a year a startup may be out of business anyway, so why start making those long-term investments if you didn't need to? Now, with this new patent regime, my sense is that a company has to evaluate patents much earlier and decide to make some potential strategic investment in patent assets that, you know, a few years ago you would not have had to do. So I am seeing companies now at even the seed stage, some of which have issued patents. The Patent Office, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, has tried to move through a process where you can expedite patent processing. So I've seen companies that are just doing their first raise that actually have an issued patent, which is very unusual. But in some cases, it's very helpful to the business. especially if they're in an area where there are big potential competitors that will spend lots of money patenting, and now the existence of that patent gives them both asset value, and even if the company goes out of business, let's say a company who's in that same space may want to acquire that patent from a defensive point of view so that they have all of the patents that might impact their own businesses. So it's a different analysis today than it was a few years ago, and you should talk with patent counsel to assess whether there's something like that in your company's technology that would benefit from trying to do some of these express patents.
Okay, last question. We got to wrap it up here. How long does it usually take you to get back to entrepreneurs after they've pitched you if you're interested? I mean, do they know right away in the meeting, or do you say, you know, how long is it usually for you?
Well, I have to say it's longer than I'd like. And part of the story is that, one, it takes me a little bit of time to mull over both the team and the vibe that I get from the team, the market story, and sometimes I either have to think, do I want to develop the expertise in that market and technology that it takes me to be able to be a smart investor? Because as I said, you know, there's probably 10 or 15 companies doing something very similar to you, and sometimes the timing just is a bit longer than I would like. For example, in the video advertising space, I looked at a company probably 7 years ago that was trying to do e-commerce and placement ads using television and game consoles, and passed at the time because I thought the technology was too complicated and it wouldn't be easily adopted. And I kept looking at companies in that space over a period of years until finally this last year I ran across a company that had an HTML5 based approach to doing e-commerce and ads within video that I thought was likely to succeed on a technology adoption basis. And so I finally made an investment. So one is sometimes these are thought processes, commitments of time and effort, and so it may take a little bit longer than you'd like. But what I usually tell entrepreneurs is persistence is key. You can ping me again at a reasonable interval of time, and I will consider that you're doing your job. I won't take any offense at that. And understand, too, that the investor, you know, think about putting a dollar sign on your forehead and walking around in public, and how many requests you will have for people to talk to you. Like, I feel like it's kind of like Hollywood. Everybody is writing a movie script, and everyone in Silicon Valley is doing a startup. And you're walking around with this dollar sign on your forehead, and you're constantly being bombarded by requests for times for pitching and helping some other person that this, you know, this guy has a friend who's starting a company. I can't tell you how many of these kinds of requests really come your way. And so understand that in that bombardment, there may be a real loss of efficiency. And, you know, just from a human nature point of view, nobody really likes saying no to people. It's a hard thing to do. So it's okay for you to be persistent until you get a no. And sometimes it's not a question of, like, I've actually told people I want to make an investment, and it's taken me a month to actually get through the paperwork and sending the money. And I think in the meantime, you know, they may be freaking out. But it's not like, if I've said I'm going to invest a specific dollar sum, you could pretty much take that as a given that it's going to happen, and that the only reason it hasn't happened is of some other bombardment is going on. So be persistent, ask again, and understand the context in which you find yourself.
Well, great. And speaking of bombardment, I know that you have another meeting coming up very soon, and that we've taken you longer than we were even going to do a half hour. Our apologies again for starting a little late. Miriam Rivera, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, as part of Startup Pitch, we're actually going to have our TA, Stephen Webster, who's currently working at Microsoft, but also has been launched a successful startup. He's going to be talking about pitching inside companies, pitching ideas within your company, and how to do that successfully. So we'll be announcing that a little later, so stay tuned on the course page and also on the Kauffman Fellows Twitter site. So thank you very much again for joining us, and thanks, Miriam.
Thank you.